All right, guys, we're live with another episode of After the Dance. I'm Langston Wertz Jr. I have Rick Bonnell with me from the Charlotte Observer. Rick, that was pretty entertaining television tonight. What do you think?
Wow. I thought obviously there were zillions of interesting quotes all through it, but I thought as interesting as anything we heard in all 10 episodes was when Jordan said, "They can't win it until we quit."
Absolutely. I was very interested to see how much he wanted to come back for a seventh and how he thought they could put it together with a bunch of one-year contracts. I'm not sure that would have worked, but it would have been very interesting to see Jordan against the Tim Duncan Spurs team go at it. Definitely would have been interesting to see what would have happened there. Do you think the Bulls could have won 7?
I certainly think so, because they still would have had a very easy path through the East. Having said that, what surprised me a little bit about what Michael said, I wonder if what he said in 2020 is what he was actually feeling back then. And I say that because I have heard so many stories about at the end of that sixth title, in ways that didn't have to do with the team being broken up and whatever, that he was just so emotionally shot that I think the idea of it being over and the expectation, I think, was a very welcome thing for him. So I think some of what we heard tonight is how any of us reflect on things, a long time after the fact. They don't necessarily jibe with what was in your head at that time.
Absolutely. I want to jump back to the first of the two episodes. In episode 9, we talked about Indianapolis, and he talked about how, other than the bad boy Pistons, this was probably his toughest competition, definitely in the East, and just how good that team was. I remember thinking that Indianapolis was going to win that series. What do you remember about that Indianapolis team and how good they were? I mean, I know history may not paint them as one of the better teams that era, but I think they were.
Remember when we talked about how there are certain athletes whose auras, psychologically win things before the games ever start? Michael did not get inside Reggie Miller's head the way he got inside so many other people. What Reggie said is absolutely reflected in what I saw watching them play. He was not afraid of Michael. I don't mean that he didn't respect how great Michael was, but there were people who were just, to be honest with you, I think Patrick Ewing is a good example of somebody who Michael was really good at, getting deep inside of Patrick's head. He absolutely had Barkley that way. Reggie was not scared of him at all and played that way. There is a confidence bordering on arrogance about the way Reggie Miller was wired that was really rare, even among the best athletes in the world.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I remember that series. I remember how deadly a scorer he was. And once he got going, it was like once that faucet got turned on, you could not turn it off. And I remember that play when he pushed off on Jordan. And as soon as he got open, I said, "Oh, that's going in," and sure did. So that was interesting to see that. But I thought tonight we saw a lot of human moments from Michael Jordan, particularly around his security officer, Gus, who had gotten cancer. I did not know this story, and how Mike called him at 2 a.m. crying about his dad, and when Gus got sick, Mike went to the hospital, spent time with him. Were you aware of that, and did that kind of give you any insight into Michael that you didn't have before?
What I think that's reflective of is there is a small circle of people. It's truly is a circle of trust. Michael does not bring people in easily, but once you're inside that circle, you really have to do something. You really have to wrong them to get back out of it. People. I think the only difference between this guy and so many other, people in his life that way is that he came into the circle, relatively late after Michael was really famous. Most of those people, Buzz Peterson, Fred Whitfield, they're people who Michael knew, Mike knew before he was Michael. And I read something that many of Michael's championship rings he gave to that guy Gus.
Yeah, that's nice. That's a nice story. I did not know that. We also saw Michael, the competitor. He's mad at Karl Malone in '97 for getting MVP. He's mad at Byron for going back to his baseball days, asking why he quit his basketball because he could guard him, always looking for that edge. But then we saw the flu game, and everybody has always said it was the flu game, and tonight we find out it's the food poisoning game. What is your knowledge, recollection of that game? And four guys living a pizza at 10:30 at night doesn't seem too cool to me.
Michael is the most nocturnal person I've ever met. I don't know how he functions without sleep. There's a story that I was just reading in Jack McCallum's book about the Dream Team, that the night before the gold medal game, he stayed up until 5:30 in the morning playing cards. He had an obligation to NBA Entertainment to do like a 2-hour interview. He left the card game. He took a shower. He walked out looking like he had just been sleeping for 12 hours, riffed for NBA Entertainment for 2 hours, and then asked the guy who was doing the interview if he had a rental car so the guy could drive him to the golf course. He played 18 holes and called Juanita, his wife, asked her to find his game shoes and meet him at the team bus, and went immediately from the golf course onto the team bus to go score like 26 points in the gold medal game.
Yeah, he's got a crazy amount of energy. Guys, if you have any questions for Rick, we're definitely taking questions. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, just type it in to the comment section. We'll put it up on the screen, like Rick answers your questions. I did not know about Gus. I also did not know about Steve Kerr. That really hit me kind of in the heart about his dad and how they asked him, did he ever talk to Michael about it? And he said it was probably too tough for the both of them. But I did not know about the Steve Kerr story. Were you aware of that? And how did that hit you?
You mean about his father?
What happened to his father? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was a big part of John Feinstein's book about college basketball. I'll tell you the most surprising thing that I heard about Steve Kerr during this documentary was that he literally did not have a Division I offer until Lute Olson offered at the end of his senior year in high school. That shocked me. And, nobody thought that Steve Kerr was going to be a great college player, much less a pro. But the idea that he wasn't even, didn't even have a Div I offer until Lute did it, that stunned me. Did it surprise you to the extent it surprised me?
No, it definitely surprised me. I mean, because I always just assumed he was a really good high school player and was a really good college player. But it just goes to show you sometimes there's a diamond in the rough, and he's gone on to a great second act. He's a wonderful basketball coach. We also became one of the key Bulls guys for hitting big shots. And I was glad they showed it wasn't just one shot he hit. He hit some shots against Indiana series that Reggie Miller said was the biggest shot of that series. So that was nice to see. I want to take it to episode 10 now. The last episode, we go back to Dennis Rodman, and he's going to be the subject of more memes now after tonight, about being here and there and here and there. He leaves in the finals and goes to WCW wrestling with Hulk Hogan, and he's hitting Diamond Dallas Page with a chair. What was that circus like when Dennis was doing that? And then I love the scene he was running from the media in the rain. But what was that like with Dennis during that time?
I think the most appropriate punishment should have been that Phil should have made him go out to those 300 reporters and explain himself rather than be fined. It's astounding to me that, Rex Chapman made a really good point that, when you average about 20 rebounds a game, you get a different kind of latitude. Dennis pushed the envelope partially because he was such an odd bird, but also because he clearly understood how much they needed him. I don't think that even somebody as off the wall as him would have done that unless they had calculated that they could get away with it.
That was tough. We have a reading question. I kind of summed it up right there on the screen from several people. And this is off topic of the series, but they want to know your opinion. Will the Hornets win a playoff series in the next 2 years?
Well, I don't know. I don't know for certain that they're going to be in the playoffs either of the next 2 seasons. I mean, I don't mean that flippantly. I just mean, as young a team as this is, I don't take it for granted that they'll qualify for the playoffs. This team has some really good parts. They've got some really big holes, and this is not a real good draft, and it's not a real good free agent class. So, if you're a Hornets fan, this team is going to require your patience for a while.
Yeah. Okay. The second question I'm going to summarize. We have several guys asking, who should the Hornets look at in the draft, assuming they're looking in the 5 to 8 range? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I love the shooting guard small forward from Israel. I think that he's going to be a player who is going to be a really good all-around player. I think he's a guy who would fit very much what their needs are, although I'll tell you this. I've had 2 separate conversations with Mitch Kupchak when he has been adamant about the fact that if he clearly thinks that one guy is the best person available when they pick, it's not going to matter what position it is. He's not going to worry about needs. I just have a feeling about this Israeli kid that he's going to be a real good pro. And the last time that I had that kind of intuition about somebody, it was about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Yeah, we kind of missed out on that one. I have another question, or comment rather. Question. Dylan Chavis, he was born in '98, so it was when the Bulls won that last championship. Would you say Kobe is the closest comparison, and do you feel like LeBron is more tied to Magic Johnson?
I would definitely agree that the way, not only in terms of his game, but in terms of the way that he's wired, that Kobe is more like Michael than any other, sort of iconic player. And I also very much agree with the idea that LeBron plays more like Magic in the sense that what opposing coaches are most scared of is his ability to find people out of double teams. He's a creator. Steve Clifford has told me for years, you avoid double teaming LeBron at all costs, because once you do, you're basically just surrendering to exactly what he wants you to do.
Yeah. Going back to the special, Scottie Pippen, we saw how gimpy he was in Game 7, but I think they tried to there's always been kind of the talk about Scottie. He doesn't come up big in the biggest games. I thought it was neat that his teammates and some of his the people in administration were talking about how gutsy Scottie really was and how he came up in the big minutes, even though he could barely even move in that Game 7. And then Scottie afterwards gave Jerry Krause some credit. Did that strike you at all with any surprise? He called Jerry Krause the greatest GM in the game.
Well, in one way, it's obvious that he would praise him because Jerry Krause is the guy that defined Scottie Pippen as a lottery pick. I'm not saying nobody else would have drafted him in the lottery, but, the phenomenon that became Scottie Pippen, Jerry Krause, to a large degree, created that by sleuthing him out. Langston, I think you'll agree with me. Scottie Pippen was going up and down on the court in that game like he was Fred Sanford.
Yes, he was.
I don't think that there would have been many NBA players, even in a game as consequential as that, who at some point would have just said, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, when Michael told him all I need you to be is to, be a decoy. I'm sure that is what Michael's expectation was, but he was more than that. I mean, we saw those 2 plays where just out of savvy, he took the ball away in really important situations.
Mm-hmm.
The guts that he showed to get to the end of that game, I don't know how many people even at the NBA level would have done that.
Yeah. That last sequence from Jordan in Chicago, the layup, beating Byron Russell on layup, the steal, and then the jump shot, Costa says it's one of the greatest sequences in the history of sports. Everybody wants to know, was there a push-off? Was the guy stumbling? What do you say?
There was contact. I don't know that you call a foul in that situation because I'm not. I kind of agree with the idea that Michael didn't push him so much as he grabbed him. What I'm getting at is I buy the idea that it looked to me like Russell's own momentum at that point had gotten him to that direction. You know, the game was different then. I don't think people quite understand how many different ways the game was different. Before the Last Dance tonight, I was watching a Hornets playoff game from '93, and there were so many little things about it that looked entirely different. And one of them was I saw players argue with referees at least 4 times that would have been automatic technicals, and they didn't even come close to them getting teed up. The culture was different. The game was more physical. The game was more rugged. I think the game's better right now because I think doing away with hand checking was really healthy to turn the game into more of a beautiful movement game.
Mm-hmm.
But within the nature of the way things were called then, I don't think that was an offensive foul.
I know there's been a lot of controversy over that. I was looking at the parade after they won and saw all the people out, and I'm thinking in this COVID era that we're in, do you think we'll ever see something like that, or do you think it'll be 3 years, 4 years, 5 years before we see something like that again?
I think that sort of event, you're right. I think it's years away, but Langston, if the Hornets won the NBA championship in 5 years, or the Panthers won the Super Bowl, everybody in this town will go wherever that celebration is and stand arm to arm. It may not be the wisest thing to do, but in a situation where a town is celebrating something they may never celebrate again, people are going to think with their hearts, not their heads.
Absolutely. Same vein, what do you think is going to happen with the NBA this season? Can you kind of look in your crystal ball and tell us what you think they may do and where they may be?
I think there's an 80% chance there'll be playoffs. I think there's a 20% chance that there will be regular season games. Langston, it will shock me just because of the economic realities of the alternative if they don't figure out some way to have a tournament that crowns a champion. I will be surprised if there's any such thing as home court advantage, because I think that the way that you pull this off, and Adam Silver has already kind of indicated this, you designate 2 places, and Orlando and Vegas are the logical places to do that. You send everybody there, and they don't go home until they're eliminated. That is dramatically more practical and dramatically more safe than flying a bunch of team planes all over the country.
And then moving forward, the next season starts in December, I would imagine. Do you think that would then become a permanent thing where we would start the NBA around Christmas, which is kind of when everybody pays attention to it anyway?
I'll put it this way. I think that is, if they don't find out that it has some sort of terrible unintended consequence that we don't anticipate, I think that the NBA season is going to drift later. By the way, the other thing that's going to happen, I'm convinced, is that you've got a chance here to look at everything in the NBA calendar and test whether it makes sense. I think we're going to see free agency precede the draft the way that it does in the NFL. It's a much more logical system. A lot of NBA general managers have wanted the NBA to figure out a way to do that. It's very difficult because of the timing of getting the salary cap calculated. But if you move the draft behind free agency, it would be widely applauded by NBA front offices.
Yeah, I've heard you make that point. I do agree with it. Before we wrap up, I want to come back to Jordan, the specials about Jordan. Mike Krzyzewski has something really interesting to say about Michael Jordan this week. Can you kind of tell the viewers what he said?
Well, actually, he didn't say it this week. It was something that he said to Jack McCallum in the Dream Team book. And I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'll just pull the book out.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This was McCallum interviewing Mike based on being an assistant coach of that first dream team. He said, "You understand the respect I have for Michael, but one thing about him, he cannot be kind." And to me, that could have been the thesis sentence of what this documentary was, which is that Michael never put anything above performance and winning. And if I were Scott Burrell, I would look back on that year and I'd think to myself, I should have been paid 3 times as much money just on the amount of abuse he took. Michael is certainly not the only person this is true of. When you're a perfectionist, you have a very hard time making peace with the fact that everybody else isn't perfect.
Yeah, I have 2 last questions for you, Rick. The first question, this actually comes from readers, and I've again put it together. Where does this Bulls team, and I'm assuming they're talking about the 98 team, rank in your top 5, and what would be your top 5 NBA teams?
Well, if we're just talking about that last Bulls team, I thought Michael put it well in the last 15 minutes, talking about how both for him and that team in general, it was more craftsmanship. They weren't physically, athletically, just overwhelming people the way that they all did when Michael was younger and Scotty hadn't wrenched his back and all that stuff. One of the things that I've read about Michael lately is he had just supreme focus. When he was looking at film, he wasn't dabbling at it. He was absolutely dissecting an opponent at this, 3-dimensional chess level, and it was, he could multitask and be ready for a game with all kinds of distractions because he was great at compartmentalizing.
Mm-hmm.
I think to some degree, the people he played with, they absorbed that sort of approach.
Mm-hmm.
We don't give NBA players enough credit for how incredibly smart they are. It isn't just that they were, blessed with all this athletic ability. They're really quick learners. They're really sophisticated people. That's why bad coaches don't last long, because the players know when you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't want to let you off the hook on that question. Let's say the 72-10 Bulls team is the best of that run, or maybe the 93 team. Would you say that team is one of the top 5 teams in the NBA, along with maybe the 86 Celtics and one of the Lakers teams? Maybe Kobe Shaq's Lakers, maybe KD's Warriors?
Well, I think the Spurs run needs to be put in that discussion, by the way. And Bob Ryan says that, that Celtics team, that when they were playing their best basketball, there wasn't anybody else, since Naismith, put the peach basket up, that could compare to that team as far as, the way that they had it going, the way that they functioned as a team, the way that they simply overwhelmed everybody.
Yeah, they were big and talented and Hall of Famers everywhere. This is the last question, Rick. It's been really wonderful talking with you about this series. Do you think Michael has enjoyed, do you think he got out of this what he wanted? Do you think this has kind of been the series he wanted to see?
I take that for granted because I think that he had so much editorial control about how it looked. Michael, I don't think Michael is a control freak, but I think a lot of the people around him are very used to having their way. And so 99.9% of the time, anything he's involved with is going to look exactly the way he wants it to look.
Okay.
It wouldn't have been as good a documentary in the absence of his cooperation, particularly because he literally had to give his say-so to use all that footage. But it would have been a different documentary if it hadn't been unauthorized, for sure.
Yeah, well, it sure was a fun month of watching. I don't, hopefully we'll have some more. I know NASCAR and golf in some ways came back today, so hopefully we'll have some pro baseball and pro basketball moving forward and maybe get a little bit more back to normal. But Rick, I've enjoyed these conversations. Thanks a lot for being on. Thanks for all the viewers for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for staying up and doing this, Langston. It was fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, take care, man.
See ya.